Hello, and welcome to Acoustic Review. My name is Ben Morgan Brown, and today I'm looking at the Statesboro 12-string from Vintage. This guitar is a collaboration between the blues guitarist Paul Brett and Vintage Guitars, and is part of a series they've been working on which aims to replicate the catalogue guitars and vintage blues machines of the 30s and 40s. The Statesboro 12-string features a solid spruce top, a maple back with mahogany sides. It has a mahogany neck with a rosewood fingerboard, and a bone nut with a nut width of 50mm. The saddle is bone and is arranged in a floating rosewood bridge, and it has a metal trapeze tailpiece. The Statesboro includes a Fishman Rare Earth humbucker, ships in a tweed hard case, and has an RRP of £749. This is obviously a very retro styled guitar, looking to fill a particular genre niche, so let's have a listen to it now and see what we think. My first impression of this guitar is that it looks exactly as you would expect a guitar that's based on the 1930s catalogue guitars to look. The sound hole, the trapeze, the binding, the tuners, the stencil around the sound hole, they all have that kind of Sears Roebuck harmony look. So it's definitely going for that 30s vibe, and the whole aesthetic of the guitar fits in with that vibe perfectly. In fact, if it wasn't for the pickup and the logo, you might be forgiven for thinking somebody had just bought a guitar through a time machine from the 30s. The overall fit and finish and build quality of the guitar is quite good, although I think there was a few areas where a little bit more attention to detail would have really paid off. For example, there's a few areas around the neck joint where the finish is not perfect. There's also some tooling marks on the fingerboard. Some of the machine heads were a little stiff to turn, and I also noticed that the octave on the low E course had a bit of a buzz to it, and I think that was from the lack of downward pressure from the trapeze. But once we'd reseated the string, that seemed to go, although I'm not sure if that comes across in the recording. I think there was a little bit of buzz still coming from that string. Having said that, the build quality is, no doubt much higher than it was on the original guitars from the 1930s. The tone of this guitar is metallic, brash, harsh, a little hollow. It's kind of wild and uncontrollable, but that's what you want from a guitar like this. It's kind of what it's designed to do. It's not a smooth, pretty, beautiful sounding instrument. It's an old blues machine. It kind of, in a funny way, sounds a bit like you're rattling a bag of spanners, but in a very musical sense. Most of the tonal range of this guitar is in the mids. There's not a lot of sort of boomy lows. There's not a great deal of bell-like highs, but it's a ladder-braced blues box, so that mid-focused tone is going to help you kind of cut through the humdrum of normal life. You're trying to sing your blues out to everybody. Although the Fishman Rare Earth is an excellent pickup, ironically, I'm not really sure it kind of matches this guitar very well, because we did find that the plugged-in tone of the guitar was quite smooth, a bit richer, a little bit more modern sounding, and a bit more hi-fi than the actual guitar itself. So although it's a very good plugged-in tone, I'm not sure if it really matches the character of the guitar that it's attached to. Of course, there's not much available nowadays that actually would give you that kind of hard 1930s sound. So You can buy this guitar without the pickup if you sort of don't want to plug it in and just mic it up, or maybe you could look at adding some distortion or something like that to the sound to get a kind of gnarlier sound from that pickup. I have to admit I did struggle with the playability on this guitar, and I think that probably does show in the video. Now, to be honest, I'm not a brash, loud blues player. I'm quite a delicate fingerstyle player when I'm performing my own music. So although I appreciated some of the qualities in this guitar, I don't really feel that I have that harsh blues character in my playing to kind of really get the best out of this guitar. I think if you try and play this guitar sort of softly and sweetly, it's not really going to reward that. It kind of needs to be like hit hard and hung up wet. One thing I did specifically find a little bit difficult with this guitar was the string spacing. The nut width is actually quite wide, but the strings are quite far in from the edge of the fingerboard. So what that meant to me was that felt like there was a lot of dead space on the fingerboard, and the actual spacing between the octave strings and the regular strings is quite wide, so I found it very hard to hit both strings at once. I found that I was either catching the octave string or the regular string, and that did contribute to the kind of slightly clangy nature of my playing when I was on this guitar. Having said that, the action on the guitar is perfectly reasonable. It's low enough for playing fingerstyle and strumming. I think it's probably just about high enough to get away with slide guitar without being painful to play. If you were going to use this guitar just for slide, you might want to raise the nut a little bit. And if you did want to use this guitar just for fingerstyle, you might want to bring the action down a little bit. I think it's also probably worth mentioning that this guitar comes from vintage, tuned down a whole step, so D to D rather than E to E. So that does help a little bit with the tension of the 12 strings. So it wasn't difficult to play in terms of pushing the strings down. I just found it a little hard to play cleanly. I think it's quite obvious which sort of player is going to favour this guitar. If you're into blues or ragtime or American primitive, you'll enjoy that almost raggedy sound and the whole experience of playing and owning this guitar. With an RRP of £749, I think it's a bit tricky to kind of talk about value for money with this guitar because, to be honest with you, there probably are guitars in the price point which will sound better and play better. But, better is subjective, isn't it? If you're looking for old-time blues sound, then you're not going to want a guitar that doesn't have an old-time blues sound. Whereas, this guitar does have an old-time blues sound, and it also comes with a case and a pickup as well. So with the originals becoming rarer, and obviously they're a lot more delicate, they don't have truss rods, perhaps at this price point you're going to be hard pushed to find a guitar that has this sound with a modern playability and build quality to it. I think it's fairly obvious that this guitar has been built with a very narrow design brief. It's obviously targeted at a very specific sound, look and feel, and if that sound, look and feel is not for you, then perhaps you're not going to look at it. But if you are really after that vibe, then you have to go and check this guitar out. I think it's very close to getting the vibe with the originals, in my opinion. I hope you've enjoyed this video from Acoustic Review. Please subscribe if you want to keep up to date with our new videos, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.